smart as he usually is.
Brown drives, scoop, lay upon the glass.
That's not the first time we've seen a superstar in green and white sacrifice the body.
Scoring net, knocked away.
Welcome into another episode of First to the Floor. Ben Vallis here. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. Before we get to our guest, Spoonie and Jake are here. Guys, 4-0. How are we doing?
Basketball rules.
This is the best.
Yeah, so good.
Living large, baby.
So good. And look, today we're also very excited to welcome back from Sports Aptitude and Luceo Sports, friend of the show, Eric Weiss. Welcome back, Eric. How's it going, man?
What's going on, everybody?
Yo. Let's go, Eric.
We've hit the mood on the head. Like, we're just all ridiculously excited about what's going on with the team right now. And I know we're going to hit it on all angles, what's good, what's bad, what's middled, but it's difficult to feel anything but pure joy and elation about this team so far. Are you aligned with that thought process, Eric, or are you taking a more objective approach?
You know, like 20 years of, like metering things out, and rightfully so. Like, you kind of have to balance that against the enthusiasm and the potential of, right? Like, there's stuff you can project. There's stuff that's absolutely unforeseeable. And then there's just like kind of the moment. So I'm very happy, right? And I have, since they got KP months ago, I was salivating over the possibilities of what could be, and then adding Drew Holiday, which I told all my friends was 100% not going to happen because he cost too much money, and they weren't going to another salary of that magnitude. Which, sorry, I was wrong. It was just icing on the cake. This is a absolutely grand time, especially relative to the state of the other franchises in town. This is like the only show in town right now. So this is a great place to be for Boston, a great place to be for us. And I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, very glad you were wrong about the Drew Holiday side of things, because we're very happy to have you on the pod, and we're very happy to have Drew Holiday on the team. Look, there's so much to get to with the team performing at this level, so let's just jump straight into it. And I think that the question that's beginning to emerge in most fans' minds is, okay, like, we had a crazy hot start last year as well, so explain to me why this is different. Like, maybe the more pessimistic fans are thinking this way. Why is this year any different to our hot start last year, where inevitably, or eventually last year, our hearts were broken? They may be wary about getting too emotionally invested, in case they run into the same emotional heartbreak this year. What's different about this year compared to last year?
I think it's just stylistically, it's just a different approach. And honestly, if you really go back to that beginning of the season too, and people keep on saying it's Golden State that it changed. No, it was the first Miami game where they started switching everything and it muddled up their stuff. That team was so basic in terms of driving from the elbows and then kicking out to the weak side. And as soon as, and they were running a ton of actions, like it wasn't all just 3-pointers. They were doing split cuts and all kinds of cool stuff. And I was losing my mind. I'm like, oh my God, they started doing stuff. But then they didn't have any contingencies, right? Or curveballs or whatever Joe uses the analogy, right? Like, they didn't have something else to throw in there. And they were limited because their scoring predominantly their self-creation came from 3 players. They got Brogdon. They never played him in crunch time, right? Or whatever. So they didn't actually add the scoring. It was just like a 6-man, another guy, but it wasn't like the collective scoring. Now they have a starting lineup that puts 5 dribble, pass, and shoot guys on the court. So if you don't go to anything else, that's like orders of magnitude different, because they're also, because it's 5 guys, aren't all wings. Like, they have a legitimate, their small lineup isn't small, because Jayson Tatum is a legit power forward size. He is not a downgrade in size for that position. And their 2 guards are like tree stumps. So like, this is like a dribble, pass, and shoot team that has no real size disadvantages and they're 5 out, right? Like that, like, it's the best collective skill set of 5 players, I think, in the NBA. That doesn't mean it all comes together. There's a whole human element, but like, in terms of what you look at, I'm not the first person to say that. And that's not a homer take, to like, having 5 guys that can dribble, pass, and shoot without giving up size or, compromising defense to any substantive level. That's the difference.
Yeah, this team, many title teams. Did you guys lose me here?
Just briefly, yeah. But we've got
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Go for it, dude.
I don't know. There's a lot of people on my Wi-Fi, I think, today. This team reminds me of a lot of title teams, specifically the one that comes Raptors team that has dribble pass shoot guys all over the court. Lowry, Van Vliet, Siakam, Marcus Gasol being like different to Porzingis but like being a threat, a guy that can do a bunch of stuff offensively. But then they also have that one guy that can just be the best player on the court on a given night. But it's this collective dribble pass shoot team that has the ferocious defense at the same time. And the Gasol Porzingis parallels, like Gasol at that point in his career wasn't like, the defensive player of the year that he was in his previous, but he did just enough to make that defense go.
I'm cautious of my usage rate here to jump in, Spoonie. So I've got some takes, but if you want to jump in, then go for it.
No, I just think that Eric, you were touching on it stylistically. It seems like on offense, they're not playing like super fast from a pace perspective, but they're so intentional about the way they're attacking defenses, where it's like they're getting into stuff quicker. And I think it was Drew or Derek White just had a quote about that. It's like we're trying to get into our first action with like 6 seconds off the shot clock, which last year, I don't know how many times like 10 seconds had rattled off the shot clock. And then it's like, oh, here comes Rob for the first pick of the possession. So they're getting into stuff early. And then their offense is very like, we're just going to pick the best matchup and we're going to go at it. And that to me feels like exactly what you do in the playoffs. And with the group that they have with those 5 guys, like somebody is going to have a mismatch at all times. Or Jayson Tatum's just going to light somebody up with a step back, apparently, because that's back all of a sudden now. But I just love the way they're playing offense and the fact that they understand that they probably have a talent advantage against just about any team they play against, and they don't need to force things. And I think you saw it in the first game. Jalen didn't force anything. He only took 11 shots, and then he had it going against when he buried the 8 threes against Charlotte. It's just going to be a different guy every night other than Tatum, and I think that's just really encouraging for where we're at right now.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, I feel like we could just wax lyrically about how amazing this team is. There's so many, like if you go on all the statistical websites, Cleaning the Glass, NBA Stats, PBStats.com, whatever it is, and just look up the Celtics, they are leaps and bounds above the field in almost every important statistical category. Steph No, who writes for sportingnews.com, had this tweet earlier, sort of a good aggregation of some of these stats I'm referring to. So a 4-game sample size is not super meaningful, but these numbers by the Celtics thus far are insane. Per at Cleaning the Glass, number 1 in offense at 125.9 points per 100 possessions. Number 1 in defense, 102 points per 100. They have the point differential plus 23.9 per 100 of a 78 win team.
Is that good?
It's 4 games.
That good?
They're on track for 78 wins. That's insane.
Yeah. And Eric,
ahead,
real
Smith.
quick. So obviously, offense, like by Cleaning Glasses, looked great. Where do you think, like, it? But I don't think it's been perfect. Clearly, it'll never be perfect. But is there a next step they can take? Is there something they can do to make it even better?
Yeah, I think so. And I think they'll all say that too. Like, without being super wonky, just continuity is not like an instant gratification thing, right? This is not like pickup basketball, right? These guys play at such a high level. They don't have a lot of reps with each other. And when they face, like, it's cool to go like ham on Washington, and the Pacers actually been pretty good this year. So I think that was a little bit more meaningful to eviscerate them, because they've been pretty good. Speaking of somebody that watches way too much Pacers basketball years. But like, these guys are feeling things out. And if you look at some of the other statistics, like touches, like some of the things, like I live in the Bay Area, right? So this household watches a ton of Kings and Golden State Warriors basketball, right? Because it's on TV. and it's good basketball to
It's
watch.
awesome.
The way that I like system offense to be run, right? Especially the Kings, who are like, they've been near and dear to my heart for a few years now. As soon as they traded for Sabonis, Indiana Pacers, there's your crossover event right there.
Yeah.
There you go.
Like, I've been his biggest stand since he got drafted. You should see some of the emails I sent during his draft year. I was like, you got to get him. But like that kind of like constant flow state of offense, that's something that this team is capable of. And honestly, I've said it in a couple of different meetings, but like, Tatum's been on fire right now, but like the last game was the best one because it was on 15 shots. And that's the thing that I look at with this team. Every once in a while, I post like a health check, like of a quick NBA.com or NBA app, like box score. And I'm like, when I see 5 guys who are all within like 3 to 5 attempts from each other, when it's like a fairly like a good team that has a balance of talent, that's what I want to see from this team. It's like, yeah, you're going to have a hot guy, like, but the key is nobody should be doing 6 for 22s. There's absolutely no reason to even for any one player to shoot 20 times unless they're like shooting 60 plus like nobody needs to like find their offense, right? Like you just find the other guy and you just play. It's not even matchups. I think like they have been doing that, but it's like, just figure out what the defensive like scheme is trying to do and then fuck with it basically until they adjust and then just fuck with it again and go somewhere else because like you have, but this is very specifically in the closing and opening lineups, right? As soon as you know you get into your rotations or wherever things change, but like, oh my God, the ability to open the first half, second half, and close the game with 5 dudes that can do that stuff means that you, in all the critical moments to gain an advantage and maintain it and close things out, you don't have to force things. You just have to play smart flow basketball and commit to like moving around and then having the person who has the ball be committed to understanding that the biggest advantage you have is basically playing keep away, right? From like your kid or whatever, like, I got the ball. And you just get rid of it. And that's the game. The game is not to like do the dude in front of you. The game is to like force the pathetic defense to chase the like guy farthest away from whatever they're trying to do. And then just continue to attack that until they are defeated, because like that's always the principle. But now they have 5 guys that at minimum have been a number 2 option in some team, right? With Derek White being maybe the worst of all of those guys, if you can say that in terms of offensive output, when he was like kind of cast maybe an offensive role above his level, even though he did like our 5th option or whatever. I don't even know if that works. Like I said, I don't know if options make any sense, but like the 5th guy was on the Olympic team. So like that's not a thing that happens much, right? Those aren't common NBA lineups.
Yeah, well, when we traded for Derek White, he wasn't supposed to be able to be a 38 to 42% three-point shooter, and now he is. But like, you talk about the keep away thing. We literally did the keep away thing in the Wizards game when we were posting up Porzingis, and it's just 7'3" dude, and then like Jordan Poole, whoever comes over to like help, and he's like trying to get up to the ball, and Porzingis just like turns and throws a cross-court pass to Jalen in the corner, who just buries like a wide open 3. That's the difference, and I'm struggling to maintain my Drew Holiday isn't that much better than Marcus Smart stance because of how good this offense is, and it's just how defenses guard Drew Holiday are just completely different to how defenses guard Marcus Smart, and that's almost more important than their actual ability to hit shots. You know, and part of why the theory I think that I have that Marcus Smart's efficiency might go kind of up in the playoffs is because the gravity just completely shifts even more so away from Marcus Smart in the playoffs versus Drew Holiday has been ratcheted up for him in the playoffs. Teams are more keyed in on Drew Holiday, whereas now he might have his most efficient season ever because like, I don't know what option he is really, but I know it's just Tatum is this unstoppable like planet force with like the moons just being pulled towards him, and then everybody else is just kind of like making quick decisions off of that, and everybody's playing efficient, smart basketball. It's a great way to describe it, Eric. They're just like, yeah, we're just going to keep it away, and as soon as you move over to try and take down the big brother, we're firing it to the oldest brother in the corner for a wide open 3.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
speaking of Jayson Tatum, like Eric, have you liked what you've seen from him so far? Do you think that he's altered his approach? It seems obvious that I think that he has at this
I
point.
mean, he's bullying straight down
Yes.
into people, which is stuff that
Yeah.
even Wayne and I, before I started, like, kind of communicating with the whole crew here, was just like, hey, like, I had always projected him as I think you can find an old tweet from this. I mean, I've been covering him forever, right? Like maybe like a couple years after Drew Hanlon. I've been like, he's been on my radar, like this kid. But like, as soon as I saw his body, I was like, as soon as this guy hits like 230, I'm like, it's over, because I could see the frame, and it was like, okay, you got the skill. And as soon as there's an element to this. I think a few people have started to speak to this, but it's one of the things I learned, like, as the reverse of, in scouting, sometimes you evaluate guys that are big, like Julius Randle. Took a long time to readjust, which is why the Lakers basically gave up on him too early, because he was so physically dominant early. It's also why Gary Trent Jr., by the way, was a guy I would love to acquire at some point in the next like 6 years. But another guy that was like physically dominant, and then people were like, oh, but he's had this advantage and he didn't get better. But the opposite of that, I've found, is that a lot of times guys that have good frames but don't have size, it takes them, and also with international guys that have like huge physical advantages and get way more foul calls for like, just sledding people or whatever because of their size differential. It takes a little while to get used to being physical if you haven't been able to use that, just like anything, right? Like you're like, hey, I got this new, card in my deck that I've never played before. So like psychologically going into instinct to be like, oh, I can just put my off shoulder into a guy, or now he's like, doing the half, he's just like straight kind of just whatever, like I'll dribble down, and then the guy challenges me, I'll just half turn, and he's just bullying guys down and hitting them. Like, he's never done that before in his life.
Nope.
Flashes. We've seen flashes before, and I feel like, how many times have we been screaming at the TV? It's like, you're bigger than everyone on the court. You're bigger than like a third of the centers in the NBA at this point. I just want to make sure we like call out, my little Pawny over here. Shout out. Thank you for the donation. Keeping the lights on here at First of the Floor. The difference is their interior pressure from Porzingis and Tatum's improved post-game made easier from the massive spacing. Teams just can't pressure Tatum and sag off, which is exactly what we're talking about. And I have like some stats just on post. Like, this is Tatum's shot chart. Last year is on the left, and this year is on the right. The mid-range game has never been a strength of his. He's always been around like 37% from the mid-range. And we kind of talked about like using the post as the way to become that third, that like really unlock that third level of scoring. Like, you can just see on the right there, he's just averaging way more attempts in that mid-range and doing it his way, I think. Like, it just never made sense to me that he would be a bad mid-range shooter when he's such a good free throw shooter, obviously a good three-point shooter when he's taking the right shots. Like, for him to be a 37% mid-range shooter is just very low, like at least in like low 40s. I think right now he's shot 7 from 14 in the mid-range so far, so 50%. Who knows if that holds, but if he can be in that 45% range, that's perfect. But yeah, so his like mentality has definitely changed. Like, anytime he gets someone that's even like the same size as him, it feels like he's like considering posting them up from the 3-point line. Like, he gets
TJ Randall once in the New York game.
Like,
Never mind.
But that's literally been like the only wing player that he hasn't been able to like take in the post so far, and that guy's a beast. He's a monster down low. But TJ McConnell was getting posted up from like the halfway line yesterday.
Yeah, well, he was posted up like Jaime Jaquez Jr. is like at his size or bigger than him.
Guy,
yeah, and he was just like taking his lunch money and like spitting off him, and it was filthy.
He was insulted. That was
He was gonna guard me with Jaime Jaquez Jr. Okay, I'm going to the rim.
Yeah.
And like the weird thing about Tatum is like he was one of the best post players in the league last year. We just only saw one a game, which is I think on NBA.com's tracking. He only got one a game. So it makes sense. Like, eventually those doubles are going to come, and he's a willing enough passer. Like, he's not a natural playmaker, but he's going to hit the open guy when the double comes. Like, he can read the floor. He's big enough to see over top of the defense. So I mean, it's beautiful. Like, hey, credit to Joe, man. He's come into this season with a lot of questions, and I think so far he's adjusted his approach enough, and Tatum is a big part of that, and it looks really good, and it's very fun to watch.
Yeah, credit to Sam Cassell as well, who seems to be the leader of bringing that philosophy into the team. And it does seem to be permeating across the roster. First possession last night against the Pacers, Drew Holiday posting up. Was it Benedict Mathurin? And he just took him under the hoop and finished on the other side. It was a beautiful, beautiful sight to see. But the skills, the winning vibes, they're not necessarily permeating throughout the whole roster, Eric. They did last night. The bench had a nice, strong, spirited turnaround from what we've seen from them
they had
so far.
46 points or something. I don't remember.
Yeah.
They extended the lead.
Yeah.
This might be a moot point now to ask this question, but despite their strong showing last night from the bench, the bench has been one of the primary concerns thus far this season with this team. Is that a legitimate concern, or can we just take it easy on them given how talented our top 6 or so is?
So this is a layered question. This is where my I wish I could give this concise. Oh yeah, but so this is how I look. One, I believe in Peyton Pritchard. And I just saw this. Most of the takes I've seen from most of Celtics fandom have it wrong. He could not succeed. That's fine, but it's not because he's too small or he's too short. You can look at a guy like TJ McConnell, who's the non-shooting version of him. There's many examples. Peyton Pritchard has the skills to be a very good player. People that I respect tremendously in scouting have had he's a good player. He needs consistent reps. You can look at a guy like Nesmith, by the way, which if you're only watching the games against Boston is not fair. He was very good and trended up last year, even though he got injured a ton and kept on derailing him. But lots of guys need consistent burn, and they need it in purposeful situations. And then I look at the combination of the roster when you talk about those 5 guys and staggering. Most of those guys are going to stagger, so you can always have a minimum of 2 self-creators on we only need 3 bench guys, and I'm looking at Hauser. They backed up very nicely. They basically did a handcuff with Spee, which was good, and then they have change of pace guys in case that
it's so good.
Put up with Lamar. That's smart, and those guys can do situational things. But if I'm looking at the skill, which based on the way Joe has started, some of that seniority, but they're going to go for the skill shooting stuff first, and the defensive specialist stuff will be much more specialist, right? That would be their intent. And I think the biggest thing is the third big is a little overblown, except for because if there's injuries, there's going to be injuries during the regular season. Someone said it was great. It's the timing and the type of injury that matters the most, right? Because I just look at playoffs. It's the whole thing is whatever the narrative is of the season. Yeah. It just needs to end in all of those guys being healthy to go into the playoffs. Because if you lose any of them, it doesn't matter. There's no viable thing, and most teams don't have some huge in case one of them are superstars goes down, we're good. They can't afford to have Porzingis go down because he is the third part of the triumvirate, right? And so even though they have other stuff a big producing and bending, there's nothing you can do. And when you look at the guys that are going to face in the playoffs, well, he's posting up at the elbow 30 feet away. He's I am going to spot shoot from a place where you have to come above the 3-point line, or you're just giving me free points. So any of the real dudes that they will face in the playoffs, right? All the teams you're going to face are going to have good bigs. That is what is Brook Lopez can't play in that series. I'm saying this. He can't play.
Mitchell Robinson.
He can't play. Mitchell Robinson. I felt so bad for Mitchell Robinson ended up bouncing back in the second half and really not being shook by it and figuring out how to do what he can do, because he's made great progress. But he had no idea what to do on defense. He's I don't do this. He's just whatever. I don't care how much we went over it, coach. Not last night. It's all of my instincts are bad on this, right? Because I do rim stuff, and this guy's whatever, dude.
At 29 feet away from the rim.
Yeah. So that stuff is great, and those guys, there's going to be some of those guys on at all times, but I think that the bench, going back to I believe in Peyton Pritchard. I think he's going to have a hell of a season because the opportunity is there, and he's going to get comfortable. I think Hauser is fine. People don't realize how streaky 3-point shooting is. One of you guys says Jay, is that you? 7 years?
Yeah. Yes, that's my favorite stat.
7 years.
His sample, the only sample sizes that matter in threes is large
Long.
sample sizes,
Yes.
right? But even within those, if you go game to game or
Yeah.
whatever, like the best shooters,
Steph
don't
Curry
sit
does it.
there and always go 2 for 5. Like it's
Yeah.
always threes are a feast and that's why they have 3-point variance. You know, like larger samples are supposed to control for this, right? So just think about that. If you're worried about an individual player's 3-point variance, like 3-point luck is a thing on team level threes because the variance in 3-point shooting is such that it's a significant differentiator, right? So any individual player, let alone a person that's going to play like 15 minutes, like you can't live and die by their threes, right? Like you have to just be like, oh, and that's why it's nice to have like, you know, Hauser Jr. or whatever. It's like Svi doesn't have the size or whatever, but he can create a little bit and he can still do what he's mostly going to do, which is stand somewhere on the perimeter and move around and relocate when the defense is like bamboozled by whatever's going on over here. And he can just like kind of raise up a little bit, right? Like those are the subtle things that you look for. I think those guys are fine. And if the biggest thing is like big, and that's what like, I like Neemias Queta. Like he is, he played in the King system. Right, like you saw it a little bit in the preseason. Like he's doing dribble hand. You know, I'm like,
Dude, we saw it yesterday.
Watch the bonus just dominate on DHOs and how it just screws up a team. And I'm like, do you know what KP could do? Because Sabonis
so easy
to work on was shooting this year. He has the drive and obviously has more power than KP. Yeah. But if you're talking about what you can do as a center playing that DHO game with those wings, I'm like, Tatum, Brown.
So easy.
Just fire off those because the defense has no chance to do anything. As soon as they make a mistake, KP can just they can do that. God forbid we get to the like rescreen where you fake it and then you cut back the other way. Like I'm just waiting for at speed DHO. And if they're doing that stuff, the 3 bench guys that are going to need to play off of whatever 2 or 3 dudes that they're going to, right, like play with, I don't think it's going to be a problem, right? I think that they just need to make sure one of the bigs is playing well enough in that situation. But the wing guard stuff, I'm like, no, they didn't give Pritch $30 million in their current cap situation, but they felt bad for him, right? Like they hate him because he can play. And Hauser is fine. Could you upgrade from him? Maybe in some theoretical world, but he's pretty good and he's on an upward trajectory. So like people were freaking out about, do you see how much he worked on the speed of his release? Like, dude. I was like, oh, he changed his shot. I'm like, yeah, so he could get way more threes off with a trailing defender. He's just like toe tap. He's doing the crazy. Just working and running into it and shooting.
He made 5 threes yesterday. One of them hit the rim just. Like the 4 of them
rim too.
Yeah, and exactly. The part of the absolutely. Yeah, we need to I think our best chance to get them to run more DHOs. I wonder if it's just like it's coming. I think Jack Simone's our best chance to start to get someone to ask Joe and Porzingis about DHOs because you are 100% right. Because like the handoff game, I know we're going a little bit back off track off the bench here, but Bam Adebayo is like one of the best handoff games in the league, and he can shoot from like 16 feet. You add to where Porzingis' space to like the 27-foot range when they're running these DHOs, it's just more and more and more space with like, but yeah, you're right about the bench.
But any of those guys can play off. Like I've said the DHO stuff with Tatum and Brown, but they're the 2. Let's be honest, as talented as they are. They're the guys, and I know I've seen it from Tatum at least because all the time I watch him in nationals or whatever. This is just about a commitment to just moving the ball and flow and realizing that when you're receiving the ball again, like I think a lot of that is just like, oh, I'm getting the ball back. And then you're like muscle memory is now I'm going to have to create stuff where it's like, oh, no, just like ditch your guy in a real quick move as soon as he's looking over there and then have him chasing you on instinct and then like double back on him and just do all that stuff. And they're screwed. If you give live ball opportunities to those guys with a screener, like that stuff is so lethal, especially with what they can do as soon as they get to those pocket areas. You showed Tatum's shot chart. Like that's what DHO does is get you right there from the free throw line extended with like options depending on how they've recovered, right? Like you're just like right on that V heading into the basket and getting all kinds of like reads, right? Based on how the defense is trying to deal with whatever happened off that. And I think that's where they're getting to. Like collectively, it's like they have so many dudes that want to play. The vibes are immaculate, as everyone says, right? And there's a purposefulness and having 2 new guys, I love having a KP on the team because that's a guy that's probably a little pissed off about being like, hey, I've been forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, I used to be a guy that people thought was like the unicorn motto was him, because they're like, this is like, what is this? Right? Like, this is like, it doesn't exist. And then he's like, oh, he's okay. He's like, I think the team's going to be worse because they lost Marcus Smart's heart and soul. I love Marcus. But I'm like, you traded him for Kristaps Porzingis. I'm like, I know the problems on this team. I'm like, it's not a complete 100% game, but I'm like, if I'm going like, I think they're going to, I'm like, no, it was always going to, as long as he's playing, it's going to be better. And then Drew Holiday, he's been here for 2 fucking weeks.
I know. It's
He
crazy.
doesn't know what the hell's going on, but every once in a while you see a little like duck in, right? Where he just like, oh, I'm going to go set a screen. He's like, woo, and he just like redirects, and all of a sudden a defender who has like 1 foot up, where it is an anchor, just gets bumped off and he just does a layup, because like if he's just operating in the middle like that while you're doing all this perimeter shit, like these guys can do little underneath like movement stuff and just redirect, and just even instinctually, oh, I was supposed to come up and do this, but I saw something else was happening based on like the screen angle, whatever, right? They can just like, they can make stuff up based on how they know each other and how they feel what they're seeing. And they have like no real experience doing that against defenses that can take away a bunch of it, which is way different than training camp and practice too, where you're like, yeah, you're going up against your teammates or whatever, but like you're running shit and it's more systematic. When you have to play Miami and you have to play New York in New York, and they're good defensively and they're not going to fuck up and just hemorrhage you free possessions or whatever, right? And be like, hey, why don't you have like unfortunately, like Boston has tended to play like the last couple of years. We're like, how about you have 30 plays on us? Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're like, no, like I call it trimming the fat, right? Like when you play against those teams, the combination of getting like that personnel in there with like that like level, like those reps, and then responding to those situations, that stuff's only going to build, right? You guys were touching on a little bit as the doldrums, like January and February is still like the kind of whatever, but even if they had, and all teams kind of whatever, it's rare to be a 65 win team, right? Where everyone's like, high five, let's kick the shit out of everybody all year long.
Yeah.
Like maybe that team has this. I'm going to be hesitant because I don't think you learn like the stuff that they do. Like Tatum and Brown are introspective dudes, man. I don't think this like in the moment, like they're not, I am always in the moment. Like they're thinking about shit. He's thinking about his kid's birthday. Like, they're thinking about like activism. Like they're not just like, today, like whatever. Today I'm gonna kill you, like just for no reason. Like
Jalen goes into a
Nets by 40.
Yeah, Jalen just goes into a meditative cocoon.
They have to be like they have to be pissed that they're like, hey man, and then it's like, hey, I didn't like that. They don't come in going fuck you, right? Like that's just not who they are, and that's fine. But I was the 4-2 math. Now you have Holiday. Now that you have White, who like. This is the most demonstrative I have.
Dude
said that he was talking in the locker room. I was like, oh, that's good. And then I'm seeing him on the court. I'm like, oh, he doesn't feel like he's like a temporary guest anymore. He's like, oh, I'm part of this team. That's huge. And that's the second guy. And then you have KP and then Al, who's been here. Al finally has the backup he needs to not have to lose his fucking mind. They are just doing whatever. And I'm like, Marcus is great and Marcus was reactionary, but Marcus was like a peer and a brother with those guys. Now you have 4 dudes that are like, hey, we need to get serious. And then it's okay if Jalen and Jayson are like the way they are like that. It's great. Their teammates are the first people to get them to like respond, right? Like then it's fine. You don't need the opposition to kick your ass to respond. You need your teammates to be like, yo, like we need to be focused. Not one voice. Now you got 4 guys.
Yeah.
4 guys is what I'm banking on getting through this thing, not magical metamorphosis in persona, right? Like I'm just like, no, it's just a different math.
I do think it's
Sam Cassell on the bench too. So
I was gonna say I think there are actually more voices when you think about Cassell being maybe the loudest one, and Charles Lee, and this year 2 from Joe. Like it's clear that he's a completely different guy, like in every facet.
In the preseason,
yeah,
like the stuff that he was saying wasn't just like the stuff. He was introspective. He opened up and it talked about his like that's all the like growth mindset. That was real emotional maturity. Like some of those interviews were like, oh shit, like this. Now I see what Brad, because I have no personal experience with like Joe. Like this is not a guy I know, but I'm like, I knew that he was highly regarded, right, by whatever secondhand, but like that was enough for me where I'm like, whatever, it's hard to coach in the NBA or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm like, when you hear guys not just being like, oh, we changed stuff or whatever, but like going through stuff systematically and owning it and actually explaining, I was like, oh shit, nobody does that. Like you rarely, like maybe if some guy gets a DUI and he has to come back, he's like, oh, I have to look at some stuff or whatever. It's not just like reviewing
Kobe Altman
and sharing it. Like lots of guys review process, but like sharing it with the group, with the media, with Gary Washburn, who's been like, even Gary had to be like, well, I was trying to be positive the other day. So I'm like, yeah, dude, it was like the, like, you know, pissing your Cheerios brigade with the media. And I'm like, dude, I would have been a little like Joe, I think, in that circumstance too. And he just could have just been like, fuck you, man. Like I won 58 games and now we're loaded. And he's like, no. He's like, I'll own this and I'll own that. And this is what I think now. And this is where you have to improve. That was it for me. I'm like, I'm good.
Same.
Good.
West Virginia guys, WVU guys.
Yeah, they breed only the best. Only the best out of WVU. Eric, that was beautiful, man. Can we please clip the last 15 minutes of conversation? That was insanely beautiful to listen to. We've got more questions for Eric coming up, but first, a quick message from our sponsor. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Both of our guys have disappeared. That's amazing.
Bathroom run. Sweeney wins.
Sorry, my dogs were going crazy. I had to get them calmed down.
Jake's coming back with the power cable as well. Shout out to CLNS for presenting this podcast, and to CLNS and to FanDuel for sponsoring it. Spoody, just want to jump into the next question for the sake of time.
Yeah, all right. So we talked a lot about offense. I think it makes sense. I would say this team's strength is probably going to be offense. The one hang up defensively I have, because they're protecting the rim like absolute madmen. They're still not forcing turnovers. They're near the bottom of the league in forcing turnovers again. That's 2 years under Joe Mazzulla. Why are they not forcing turnovers with this defensive lineup? Is it something Joe's doing defensively? Is it the drop coverage? Is it just bad luck? Eric, what do you think?
I think it's coming. They're challenging that 22 steal game was one of the things that really showed me what they do. But there was a couple of things that they did in the Washington game that even though some of this was offensive, like the pursuit of getting second chance opportunities in that Washington game, coupled with kind of what they showed in that preseason, like they know when to attack. Just like those in the stuff that drives you nuts when you play Miami, right? Where they don't just like concede the swing pass, or you're like, I'm just going to split the guy. Like, wait, he challenged it at the point, like he was aggressive before I split it. Like, it's not like, oh, like they have that. And I think that we've seen it in bits in the first two games. The last two games, there was other stuff, but like when you're just like absolutely hammer tossing people, like I also get that you might not need it. I think that we did see it a little bit in the first two games, and it's getting, you know, the stats like 4 games and whatever. Like, I know they can do that when they get mad and they're like, hey, we need to do something else. It's a card they can go to, I believe, to do something else, and they will just harass in that manner and get aggressive. And Holiday's definitely been doing it. Like the whole Holiday White, like
stock exchange
competition or whatever. Like, like internal battles. Another one I'd love to have them do is if they kept a win-loss record in the locker room and it was just in the third quarter. They're just like, what's our win-loss record in the third quarter? I really believe it's like small-sided games for practice, for drills and stuff. It's like, oh, they love it. That's like, you know, small manageable goals within the season that are like motivators are another way that you keep focus, and you don't just go, it's January and February. You make little wins. It's like Major League when they strip little pieces off the owner or whatever forever. That's an actual like management technique, right? Not that particular instance, but like, you know what I mean? Like giving things to do. It's not just the end of the year report or whatever. You're like, well, let's make things fun and keep people engaged in little competitions like that make every game meaningful for something that isn't just the bottom line of wins and losses or getting to the playoffs. And like these guys have elements of that fun stuff in there. Like, look at KP. Every time he talks, he's like, "This is ridiculous."
It's so funny.
Nobody's guarding me, though.
It's so funny.
Tatum's first response when he's like, "Dude, he was like the biggest guy on the court by a lot." Like, that's not like very smooth. Like, and like Tatum will give you some fun stuff every once in a while, but he's usually pretty like blah.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah,
Yeah. And he's like, he was really big. And I'm like, well, it showed because they just kept on taking whatever pathetic guy that he could just shoot directly over. Like, he was just like, it's like, it's like, he was the biggest guy by a lot. Those little things, I think, are what keeps things like interesting because they shook it up and people love the idea of that in general. But it wasn't just a shakeup, which is like random.
Yeah.
Like, they purposefully altered things and brought interesting people in that do stuff that I think keeps everybody knit together in a way that's interesting. And Jaylen was my biggest. And everyone's freaking out. Like, I was like, oh, well, how is he going to adjust and whatever? My key was, well, if they just fucking flow and nobody's well, I'll get more shots than you. It's just like, just pass to the guy that's open. And that's all. And you'll, whatever, just do things fast and it'll work out. Right. I'm like, everybody just go fast. And
Jaylen should have the most efficient season of his career, really.
Yep.
Everyone should. If everyone doesn't set a career high in field goal percentage, then they better be damn close because you're doing it wrong if you're not. Because this is just space for days. Eddie House said it the other day.
Yes.
Who operate or Scal or whatever. It's like, this is the most space to maneuver that these guys, as long as they just move the ball and they don't fall into the let's take the loaded defense because we're tired route, they're never going to have guys in the positions like, it's like a 30% decrease in like tight quarters interior maneuvering or whatever, right? I'm just making up some kind of like thing, right? like, you know what I'm saying? Though, it's like, oh, that guy's like now 1.5 feet further out from across the, the paint or whatever, right? Like these little areas to negotiate. And you see the way these guys finish in tight quarters. When you're talking about 6 to 12 to 18 inches of difference on a recovery or whatever, that's like a free lane like to the basket versus like a guy getting a hand on something. And that's every single one of those guys can take advantage of that.
I mean, like looking at the field goal percentages now of the top 5, Jaylen's is the lowest at 48.6 right now. And then Holiday at 53.8, Porzingis 55.8, Tatum 56, and then Derek at 64.7. Like, and Jaylen's has just skewed a little bit from like that first game, or really. Other than that, he's been fantastic. So
yeah, it's 49% too.
Yeah, it's terrible, like, dude.
He's the worst. I'm like, that's still 49%.
Yeah,
pretty good. Derek White's true shooting percentage is 82% right now, so that's pretty good.
That is actually, in fact, a lie. That is not a true shooting percentage. That is a magical fairy tale.
Dude, he's been hot for so long. Like, hot hands is like the perfect name. Well, like, I didn't realize going back and looking at his playoff stats, he was 50, 45, 91 for the whole playoff run last year. Like, he's amazing.
Yeah.
He was unbelievable. He was
some of the pull-ups he's taken.
Yeah, the pull-up 3 thing now is the catch and shoot thing got fixed, but now he's a pull-up 3 guy as well.
Look at his reactions. Like, it's not just how quick he's going into that shit. He's like feeling himself. Like,
he's
like,
Nick Younging it. He's like walking back.
Yeah,
he's doing that thing. He's like, dude, holy shit, where did this guy come from? I'm like, yes. I'm like, that's the thing. I'm like, I love your professionalism and everything you do, but I'm like, oh, like that. There's a little Sam Cassell in there, man. Oh, by the way, with hot hands, we got best vibes thing check, and I put this on my little sub thing. We've got
El Fuego
nicknames. 2 good nicknames in 4 games. You know how hard nicknames are to get? We got Hot Hands, which you get a shout out for, and El Fuego for unintended humor is the best nickname you could ever come up with for Jaylen Brown. Like, that is like, I can't think of a better way to come up with a nickname that fits everything that Jaylen Brown is than El Fuego.
It's perfect. And then Derek White's dad coming in with the stock exchange as well for Derek and Drew. It's just like, we're only 4 games in. What are we doing?
3. Yeah, 3 nicknames.
Yeah, I know.
I haven't been keeping up again. I was like,
it's tough. Yeah.
It's
perfect.
And just the magic of old school Twitter where a player's dad delivers like the perfect nickname for our backcourt duo. It's amazing. I love NBA Twitter still. It's still real. It still exists. So we're all very excited here, Eric. You know, there's so much to celebrate about this team. Obviously, that is killing everyone All the stats are amazing. There's nicknames galore. Everyone's individual and team success is just like through the roof. If you had to nitpick, if you had to say, okay, this team doesn't win a championship and it's not a health-related issue, what's their downfall?
I think it's exactly that. Is we haven't reached the level where what we're talking about. We've seen these things in the last 4 games, but like remember that their offense was not amazing in the first 2 games against the teams that I actually care about. But the Knicks eviscerated them last year in 3 consecutive. Like I was like, they'll lose, and I believe that they would have lost if they had played the Knicks, maybe in 6 games. Like the Knicks would have killed them in the playoffs last year.
Probably.
Like KP just decided, and that was their first game, right? Like this is the building stuff. Like they're going to do better against them. But when I look at the way they played that game, how they played defensively in that game, how they survived 3-point differentials in those first 2 games, I'm like, my nitpick for them is just that they have to commit to doing that thing when it's hard, because there are teams that aren't going to just be like, oh shit, they defeated us. Like they're going to actually be able to give resistance, and you can't stop doing those things and go, oh, okay, well, let me try plan B. Like it's like soft switches. You can't soft switch to your like go-to thing of like going, oh yeah. And just like, oh, well, that, like you have too much to give up on your first bid, right? You can't just be like, oh, that didn't work. Let's go into the old number 1, right? Like they have to stay committed to moving the ball throughout the possession.
Yes.
Because again, Golden State, Sacramento, that kind of stuff is the gold standard. You want to move the ball, you want to make quick decisions, and you want to like understand the collective skill sets of your teammates in order to just instantaneously know how you've set something up. Like last night's game finished, like where I was listening to your show, I almost started writing about it because it was so amazing. I was like, holy shit, this game's amazing, guys. We're still talking about the 51-point blowout. And I'm like, art is happening right now in the quarter of that game. And it was only like 103, 102 or whatever. It wasn't even a high scoring game. But the execution in the critical moments was not, let me just, like Steph doesn't, like even with his crazy shots, he's still running stuff to get into positions to make quick. Like he doesn't just like, nobody dances with the ball on either one of those teams as their thing that they do. Everything is fast, and because of that, they go through way less dry spells when they're playing a real opponent. They can respond back because the ball hits 3 people while they're moving forward, right? Like towards the basket. Like that's where this team needs to get to for me to believe. But it's not a championship. I'm not seeing a championship product right now. I'm seeing 5 guys that are amazing. And I'm like, where can they get to? But I'm not like, oh, I saw it. Like, we're good. Sign it up. Let's start them tomorrow.
Yeah.
I do know they're going to beat the Bucks every single time they play them though, this year. They're much better than Milwaukee. Milwaukee has been not amazing.
Yeah, well, look, they couldn't. You talked about Brook Lopez. He could barely play before when they did have Drew Holiday and they did have a healthy Chris Middleton. Now, that is an issue. I think that's 100%. It's like, as you said, the 21-6 or 5 start last year, where they were kind of doing a lot of the things, driving, kick, moving. You have to stay committed to this system and trusting your teammates, moving the ball, finding the right places. Like it did happen in the Knicks game. And look, that was the first game, but the old habits, they are in there. They are like in Jalen and Jayson more than anyone else. And that's obviously the two most important guys. But there was like 4 possessions in a row where they lost the lead in the Knicks game, where it was Jalen took a shot, Jayson took a shot. Even Derek did an ISO possession where, at least in the Pacers game, the ISOs are post-ups as opposed to just like dancing on the perimeter. Put Jalen in the post, put Jayson in the post, and ISO down at the block and force help. And those ISOs become they kind of force those guys into moving the ball because the reads are so much easier from those positions. But yeah, those habits are in there. It's just day after day after day, staying committed to breaking those habits. So when you do get to like down 2-1 in a series against the Nuggets, you don't just divulge into like what you know from years past.
Yeah, and it felt like that Knicks game was such a perfect first test for this team because the Knicks are so solid. They have tons of continuity. They basically have no new players other than DiVincenzo, but that guy fits in.
Played with like half his teammates like for 4 years.
Yeah, right. Yeah. At Villanova. So and they coughed up that lead. I think they were down 5. Joe takes the timeout, and then they went back in to actually playing offense in the last like 4 minutes of that game. And that to me is something that I just feel like has not happened with this team over the last couple of years. It's like, it doesn't matter how many timeouts you take, doesn't matter what you do. Every coach from Udoka to Stevens to Mazzulla could be yelling at them to go, get into stuff. And it still devolves into that crossover, step back, bad 3 in crunch time. But in the Knicks game, they really intentionally, okay, Tatum, KP, pick and roll. We're going to get into our stuff and let's do it. And they we should have lost that game after Jalen had those 2 turnovers. They should have lost that game, and they didn't. And then having
KP
Miami
just
right
said
after
no.
that.
He was like,
he did.
Fuck it, I'm going to do it. And they're like, oh shit, we have a guy that can do that. That's their habits though, right? Because if you're being fair, it's like, dude, they've had good teams, and they had some teams before they were the main guys. The weird thing when you look at the metamorphosis of this team over the course of, the Jays both being here or whatever, is that it has changed so much, even including their roles as this has gone on. There's been a constant inconstance to what has gone on with them. And then the last couple of years where they've been the guys, the thing was set up to basically have them do all that stuff, right? First, Ime, who didn't have, and that was a year 1, 2, or whatever. Offense is always, that's the other thing too. Offenses take time. I'd say 3 years under the same system is what you really want before you really see. Now, talent can do a bunch of stuff, but if you want to see what talent applied with continuity looks like, we haven't had that. We've had 3 coaches in 4 years, 4 seasons or whatever. We've had all kinds of personnel shifting over that same 4-year period of time. This team just needs to stay together for 3 seasons. And then I know the financial stuff, and I was getting in an argument a little bit with Corrales the other day on it, because he's like, in 2 years, they 100% have to trade everything. And I'm like, because of the things, teams operate at losses sometimes, especially with the value. There's a lot of things that can happen. What I look at is what will White and Drew Holiday's extensions be? My guess is you get 3 years with you have the option of 3 years with all of this, and then Holiday's naturally dropping off or dropping down. Horford's aging out, and then you probably end up signing Horford to an extension. This is another one of these things, if you don't count the money, where you'll get guys to extend an extra year past when they know they're going to be done or whatever, so you can trade them, right? That will be your, you only have minimum contracts to trade. But the 1-to-1 or the 1-to-many doesn't change if you trade to get a role player then it's still in the 125 or 150 depending on where the team you're trading with is, right? So all this it's gonna be really hard. You won't be able to aggregate, you won't be able to do all this other stuff. They already have the pieces, so if the pieces stay healthy and they can float a short-term loss, right? For valuation on the franchise, plus you'll make more money because you'll
going deep,
And these guys have banked cash. I think they cleared $88 million last year with their thing, which is lower.
Interesting.
Because they don't own the building or whatever. But but
it's pretty good.
This team just needs some continuity, and continuity will deliver real results in the short term, which I mean short term as of this season, and in the long term over the next 2 or 3 seasons. If they just, I think they'll learn those lessons. I guess we're not going to just see them always I adjusted in real time and figured you out. They'll have some, oh shit, it didn't work. Those are the teachable moments that coaches I think the commitment to doing that is there. And I think Jalen and Jayson, this is where coaches talk about trust and stuff all the time. This is not trust I don't trust. It's just they just need to know those guys can do the things when they're muscle memory is must accomplish objective and are pretty fucking good at it. It's not I hate when they do that. They only lost in the finals and then lost 4. Man, we've lost in the conference finals 5 times, man. It's say that again. Take the wine out of it and just be it's a process. They made substantive improvements and changes to address, and I believe in the core people. I believe in Jalen and Jayson as human beings, and I believe in this group as human beings, and I will put my money on those human beings with that talent. Like, that's my bet.
Yeah, and it's always been as well, like now the talent is at a level that it hasn't been before, and the fit has been in a place that it hasn't been before. But then also, like, I remember being in the bubble and Tatum, doing the 25, 10, and 5 for the whole playoff run, like those averages, and being like, we need 27-year-old Tatum for us to beat the Heat and for us to have a chance in the finals. It's just like,
I believe that was the playoffs where Jaylen absolutely kicked the dog shit out of Miami that everyone likes to forget from last year. Like, you just can't handle Miami. They figured him out. I mean, I'm like, I watched the bubble. Maybe you guys were like, had COVID and were in the hospital, but like, I seem to remember like
we had Brad Wanamaker as the sixth man.
Yeah, that was like Jaylen Brown stood on his head in that series. I think he had a 46-point game or something.
Yeah.
In one of those
and he was good in the conference finals the year prior as well, like Game 7
in the playoffs. He's had one bad playoff series since his like rookie year, which like doesn't count. Like he's fine. It's the people. Their bad habits are just them deciding not to do it. And that's, if I had like James Harden, maybe I'd feel a little less certain about that. But like, I got two guys that I thoroughly enjoy as people. And I'm always going to bet on people in any group. Like, it's the people that matter for the performance level when the skills are there. Skills are there. The people feel like they're there, and the people are the magnifier for those skills. Bar none.
When you talk about loving the Kings and the Warriors, like that is a huge reason why the Warriors have been as successful as they are, is because Steph Curry is like the gold standard for a superstar, right? Like, he's similar to Tatum. He's kind of boring. He just like
terrible at commercials.
Yeah,
I mean, they're commercials together. They're both terrible.
Yeah, but they turn up. There's no drama. There's no trade requests. There's no like Steph. Like the Warriors draft James Wiseman with the 2nd overall pick and like absolutely screw up like a 2-year window of like moves, but because he's so good,
worst he possibly could have made.
Dude,
so many people were just screaming, like, take Halliburton or LaMelo.
Anyone, like so many.
The only thing you had to do, 1 or 2.
Thank God they didn't do that, Jesus, because like and like they're able to survive that one, obviously because Steph, skill wise, is who he is, but part of that is
that we've ever seen on planet Earth.
Yeah, and then also incredible, like 99th percentile and like 5 other things. But yeah, like Tatum, who's getting better at all of his weaknesses. Steph Curry, like defensively, like a great way to like litmus test someone on how much they know about basketball is if they say, oh, but Steph Curry still's a bad defender. It's like, no, he's actually like a really good guard defender and has been now for like a couple of years. It's like those weaknesses that these guys have when they're 21, if they're the right type of person, they will just probably be like mostly gone when they're in the 27, 28-year-old seasons.
Absolutely. Well said. Everything is all about being in the right place on defense. And that comes with, yes, you have processing, but it's a commitment to being in the right spot. Yeah. The physical limitations matter, but like 70% of the pie is not fucking it up for everybody else. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like that's it. Just do your fucking job and the defense will have like an ability to do things, right? Like
that's Sam Hauser right there, man. Dude. That's why he's like fine on defense, because he's usually in the right spot. He doesn't get completely roasted on straight line drives.
That shot release, man. People are so like worried about it right now. It was the first thing that stood out where I was like, oh, last year you put me, I was like, oh, with your weird obsession with Hauser. And I was like, fine. And I'm like, okay, so he moved a little bit. And then like this year I was like, oh, that's all you did in the offseason, was just run as fast as you can and basically be putting your feet down while you're receiving the ball and then basically doing a no dip, like above the head, like
it's
receive, right? And I'm just like at speed, like it's actually Korver. Because Korver, like if you watch like whatever, like from age 29 or whatever that like point was where he hit the like Hawks. The Korver that everyone remembers. Like, Korver was out of the league at one point when he first was close to it. He was not playing at all
after
he
Philly, right?
He found his groove, but like that quick, and you're just like, and you just like tap and go, right? And you're just like literally like jumping sometimes when you plant foot, right, to get around the screen. And as soon as you're on your line, like you're not stepping into that, you're like going boop, and then you're just like catching it. It's a jump, right? Which is an active muscle move. Like watch some of that. Like I was not expecting him to have the dexterity or the agility to kind of get into some of these, and people were too worried about the release point. And I'm like, I'm not worried about his hands. If he thinks he can get a friggin' like no dip, like no motion shot off where it's all like kinetic energy up the kinetic chain from your leg, I'm like, well, he's a pretty big dude. I'm like, which is why I didn't think he could do that stuff. I'm like, he's 6'9", he's kind of a husky lad there, right? And like, his body will continue to change too if he's going to be this guy. But like, he's a big guy. Like, that's impressive. If you're like nerdy, like, ooh, like, you know, wow, let's like watch Sam Hauser develop this year. I was like, that stood out immediately. I'm like, oh, that'll pay dividends for sure. I'm like, stick with that. Like, that's a problem.
That first three he hit, I think it was a corner three off a Tatum pass last night when it was actually not a 50-point game. And like, he just caught that thing and fired it so fast out of the corner. And it was like, oh, we might have a new Sam Hauser on our hands here. But Eric,
watch his setups. Just watch him. Sorry, just watch his setups on those shots. Rewind and be like, dude, he came out of nowhere. He's like, whoop, I'm gone. He's like, hey, I gotta get that ball.
He dropped down from the wing, like from the above the break, and he just like he flew to the corner rather.
His relocation,
he read Tatum,
his relocation is on like an entirely different plane of existence, which is like everything for fucking with a defense. He only needs to have a game like he did like 1 out of every 4 times. Yeah, everyone's gonna go, oh shit, go get that guy. Like, there's no chance that won't get attention, right? That alone is you're like, I'm fine. Like,
like. They can. What's cool about him is that they can win a game where Sam Hauser goes 0 for 4 from 3 like super easily, but he's gonna have like I don't know, minimum, let's call it 10 games where he goes 4 for 5 or 5 for 6, and then like there's a 0% chance you can beat the Celtics in those nights because it's just like, how are you supposed to deal with like these weapons coming off the bench where they're extending these leads? Like, oh my god, we survived the freaking buzzsaw that's the Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown, Jayson Tatum, Porzingis lineup, and then Pritchard and Hauser hit 4 threes in 2 minutes. It's like
backbreaking.
Jesus,
Vibe Central, right? Like, that's the stuff we're talking about. The collective,
the energy
team is those guys will do that stuff just when you need someone else, when it's getting like stale or whatever. It's like teammates live for that shit, and it'll usually happen in moments where you're just clowning the other team, and like those guys give you shit, and like the practice stuff and all that, which is not very sporadic during the regular season or the season play, but those guys know each other, and when those guys go off, like that just adds so much to that as well. So there's the tactical part where I'm like, I'm not worried, but then there's also that like social emotional part where you're like, oh, that's great stuff. Like those guys having nights really gets respect, right? And those guys have fun. Any of the media is going to get way better answers in all these press conferences. Like, people will be feeling stuff. Like, we've had awesome press like that's the vibe test, right? What's the difference?
Yeah.
How's the fucking atmosphere in the post game?
Getting hot hands and Derek White being like, "Hey, shout out hot hands." Yeah, like that doesn't happen.
Hot hands.
All right, so awesome. This is some Bill Simmons body language doctor stuff, but like the main reason I believe in Peyton Pritchard is because every time he hits a 3, Tatum gets so hyped.
Yeah, they get so hyped for
Tatum's
him.
like, he gets so pumped every time Pritchard hits a 3. I'm like, that guy's got to be a baller. There's no way Tatum's that invested in some bad players making a shot,
They played at Hoop Summit together. Oh, no, they didn't play at Hoop Summit together. They played against each other in Hoop Summit. I gotta go back. He was not in
because they're like pretty much the same age. I know, right? Because
dude, Pritchard's good. Like
he is good.
Older.
There'll be a whole part of the season where everyone's like, "Oh my god, Peyton Pritchard's like legitimately good." Took Fred VanVleet 4 seasons and the birth of a child to become Fred VanVleet.
We are PP guys.
Oh yeah,
be patient with the small guys. Let the small guys who have super good brains figure out how to overcome the difficulty of being like TJ McConnell's still getting better. Every year he comes back, I'm like, is this the year he falls out of the league? I'm like, no, he's like a starting point guard now.
Like, it's like, can we trade for TJ McConnell, dude? He's awesome.
So annoying.
Small guys eat, man. Like, feed them slow, feed them steady, and let them grow. Like, that's it. Like, I'll bet on Peyton Pritchard every time.
Oh yeah, I do. Like I feel like he did need that game yesterday because like the Washington game, like it was. Clearly, it looked like a confidence thing to me. He looked quite hesitant. Like he needs to just be like gunning and confident and aggressive.
He had 9 assists.
Yeah.
He's just diming people up, dude.
You see that
going
guy
to the
that won,
rim.
I think we all had an assist in that game too.
Yeah.
Like everyone had assists. They're giving them out. It's like free pizza at the end of the thing. It was
Dude, I can
amazing.
throw a little. I can throw a pick and pop pass.
You
to
get an assist.
Porzingis.
Yeah, it's like, hey, fan inbounding. Now, at any Celtics home game where they're leading by 40 or more in the fourth, a fan will be chosen.
Random
to
fan. Yeah, pick and pop.
Yeah, it's
Draw it up and hit it in like the 10-minute mark, and your play might be right. But
the hero among us gets to go from getting the wave from the crowd, and they get to run a pick and roll.
awesome. Yeah, like
All right,
Yeah,
go ahead, Eric.
No. We've had. We can like. There's still like 78 more of these things.
Yeah.
No, okay. So I was gonna like head towards wrapping us up because we've already taken an hour of your time. Okay, I think the biggest question we've got, and with the caveat, it's only 4 games. Eric, Jake, Wayne Spooney. I'll talk in the third person. Is this the most expectant you've felt about a championship since 2008?
Wow.
Because I remember when they traded for KG, you know, they had already traded for Ray, and everyone's like, why are they trading for Ray Allen? This is dumb. And then they trade for KG, and it's like, oh, actually, no, this makes total sense. So, Eric, is this, like, do you expect a title? Like, are their percentage the highest since 2008?
Yes, unequivocally.
Shit.
Not as high as that's the difference since 2008.
Yeah.
2008, I mean, I was literally at that draft when they made the Ray Allen trade. It's the first thing I wrote. It was like online when I was working at Draft Express. It was like, oh, they're going to trade for KG. I'm like, I got it. Like Fred Katz is losing his mind. I'm like, oh, this makes sense. I'm like, they totally finally worked out whatever. And they're like, no, we said he'd never come. I'm like, but now they have Ray Allen. It'll be fine.
Yeah. It's now. Yeah.
Yeah. This is the most expected. Like, again, your 5th guy was on the Olympic team. I don't know. Like, it sounds, I just say that because it's like, go find 5 dudes, like 4 of which have made the All-Star team before, like 2 defensive play. Like, it is the most heralded and decorated starting 5. Not collective. Oh, because LeBron is waiting factors or whatever. I'm just saying that if you just like whatever, like individually, it is the best collection of 5 guys in terms of status and stature, right? Like it is just like it's ridiculous. So yeah, how can you not be like, if they just stay healthy and don't be assholes, which I definitely believe in the last one is not going to be a problem. Like they just need to manage. And like last night, Al got to take the night off. The only thing I worry about is injuries with this team. It's like Al played 11 minutes. Like, what's wrong with that? I was like, it was a DNP, like dead on DOA. Right?
Just got some active. He just got like a nice little workout in. He's just on
he
the.
just got to like jog. He's like, hey, let's do some like warm ups. And
2 minutes too many for Al.
He didn't even play hard. Like the last rotation, he's like, I mean, he did like where he's supposed to be, but he didn't. They were like, no, we don't need to do any kind of drives and take your legs out or whatever. Just be a hub and kind of stand there and let people do shit. Like these low load games where they can just throttle people are so valuable across here. But you can talk about cutting out 15 to 20% if you're that good and stay committed to the things like coming out strong in the third, not sleepwalking into certain opponents or whatever. And you could just buy a percentage of the season back, right? Like by doing that. And that's your biggest mitigator for significant injury, right? Is just like, just pay it forward, just earn the rest, and you will greatly increase your chances of getting to where you want to be in the best shape possible to do the thing you want to do.
Yeah, look, we've banked an extra 2.4% of the season so far with the Wizards and the Knicks series. I'm there as well. I mean, since the 2008 season, I was a believer in the team before that we were going to maybe win the title before Rob got injured in the 2022 season, just because they were blowing teams off the court that easily. I think the defense was that good, but once Rob was never the same. They still don't quite do it just because they still had those bad habits in there. I just know how hard it is to win a title, and so I'm just like trying not to like even. But now the East like doesn't worry me. it's really just Denver to me right now. And obviously we're projecting way too far down the line, but it's like that's the one team where, and if there's only one team when all things are equal that you're like I'm really worried about, then like and they're in the West, it's like all right, well, cross that bridge if we get there.
The Knicks still too, man. The Knicks have a lead on you in continuity, and their vibes are immaculate too.
We got the Knicks. Come on, Eric.
I'm not saying I'm just saying I am not worried about. Oh my God! I'm just like, do not walk over that. Like Milwaukee has time to do stuff. The Knicks are a real team, but I'm like, I don't think we walk over anybody. That's the thing. They need to be the people we talk. Right? That's the concern. Is just like they need to get to a certain level, and there are other teams that if they don't have that level, can absolutely beat them in short series play because chance is involved. You just need 2 bad games from whatever, and you don't have that, and they can poke on it. That 7 games doesn't represent who the better team was. It represents collectively where both teams are in their like individual narratives, right? And that's how teams can come back and beat a team. And it's like they're never like these referendums on shit. It's just like, well, what point in the narrative is it? And then how do you change it? It's never like, oh, go back to the beginning. Like they're multi-season journeys. With Denver being the biggest proof positive. They weren't an overnight baked thing. They built that team systematically over a 5-6 year period of time, and they made purposeful decisions and then went through extreme like stress and strain by losing, being a big like there was a 2-year period where people wanted them to blow, like not blow it, but like, there was a lot of like this dipshit team just blew a 3-1 lead. Or they went back-to-back playoff years where they went down 0-3 or whatever, and they won one of them and then they lost the other, whatever.
That's series, wasn't it?
Yeah, like these are like frustrating things that are like very familiar, right? And then you're like, what is happening? It's like now they're like, oh, the Nuggets. I'm like, I watched all that shit, man. I've been watching Jokic since he was a rookie. I'm like, and I was a big Nurkic guy. I'm not gonna say I tuned in for Jokic. Although there's a fun story about that at Hoop Summit also. But like that team had a journey. Like that team came together, and that team made they were like, let's star power it. So I don't really like the Clippers. Like they're fine, and like it's
they're
cool.
The worst.
Like, and then you like, I don't know, like I'd rather build a team that has a more intuitive fit with each other than be like, hey, why don't you guys figure it out? Like that works. We've seen it work before, but like Denver is a constructed team that was done in a metered, purposeful way. And this Boston team, since like, I thought Brad was gone. I tweeted right around, I'm like, oh, this is just something to like be able to trade him to like the Pacers or whatever. I'm like, there's no way Brad's staying in the front office. My apologies to all you guys in the front office, man. I thoroughly like apologize. I just didn't make any sense to me that good of a coach would suddenly be like, oh, I'm done coaching. And I'm like, no, he's been amazing at this shit.
Unreal, dude. That's why at this point you have to just every move that he makes, like the Missoula thing being maybe at the top where everybody was like, how can you keep this guy?
Yeah.
You know, and Brad clearly very confident in the type of guy that Missoula is, clearly understands ball like better than anyone else, like, and keeps making these moves that either no one thinks of or sees coming, because we're still yet to get like a report of a trade potentially happening outside of the Drew Holiday trade. That's the one deal so far where it's like Boston's interested, and all of us being like, oh, would they really do? Would Brad really do it? And Brad's like, fucking damn right, I'll do it. And he'll pay
when it's available.
Yeah, and
damn right.
Yeah,
we talk about crunching the numbers. That's the like whatever. We're getting like these guys have been so purposeful about it. It's not just like, oh, we need to get stuff. He still has assets.
So many assets. All of his own picks.
So many seconds.
He concentrated the first round trade. The first round picks are just 5 years out and 6 years out, back to back. Like if you look at that's why I look at in Wick's comment about 6 years or whatever, and how you look at the salaries. Like I don't have all the answers there, but there are answers to be found there.
100%.
That's team building all the way top to bottom. This has been an exercise in developing something that has been at a very high level, but like those last pieces are what informs you that there's a purposeful, like this is not throwing shit out there and
it's not the Suns.
Like, which is fine, whatever. That's a good team, and I think they're a real contender. They have to come together. The only team that even remotely made Denver sweat for like 5 seconds during the playoffs. Like that's it. Like they're good. Like KD's good. Like I'm not like he's good. But like that's a lot easier And then they had to solve like the Ayton problem. I think I like your Nurkic as a fit on Phoenix if he's back healthy. Like because he has very good. He's a good playmaker. He does a bunch of stuff. He has to play better defensively, but like that's still a like just making a move to make it work thing versus being like, okay, we have this.
Yeah,
like, this has been a real chess match kind of thing, right? There was no like urgency thing to like we got to be in the market this year or whatever. Like everything has been like, where's our team? What are our options? How should we approach this? And then making those moves. That's how his tenure has felt to me. And like the results have been like, especially when you consider some of the things that weren't foreseeable, which is those transitions back to back to back mainly, and the personnel, kind of overhaul. Like that's good work. And that's like a fun thing to be able to go into as a Celtics fan. It's like, I don't know what'll happen this year. None of us know what'll happen over the long term. We all know that. Like we can't ultimately be like, we got it, boys. Like, famous last word. But like back to that media post-game thing, like this is an atmosphere. This is what I feel and I was 2008, man. I just moved to North Carolina. I just left the year before. I went down to start working professionally in basketball, and I was like, cool, I gotta go where it's like cheap and I can like make it work because I gotta fly everywhere all the time all year long. And I'm like, neat. And I just left. I had the credentials for all the shitty 24 win and like whatever stuff, and I was like, it was awesome. Best time of my life. And then I'm like, I moved away from home. I'm like, oh, they're gonna win the championship. Awesome. So like that vibe season, like that's the kind of shit. This team has been like, there's been like, they were the lovable whatever when they upstart like the 76ers. This is
like Tatum's rookie year. Yeah.
This is a real team with real expectations. It doesn't have this like, especially in Boston with like Bill Belichick, getting dementia in front of us and like whatever, like whatever is happening, like just forgetting how to like do things. And like whatever, the Bruins are fine, but they're in a transition period just for what they did. And then having the Red Sox be like this. Boston used to be a like super like anxious, aggressive fan base, but very like pearl clutchy and whatever. And it's like this team has been able to avoid that for the most part. The last couple of years, have been like whatever. I don't feel any of that right now. We'll see little signs of it, but like to kind of have this collective exhale. Maybe that's the sheen of the moves, but I don't remember the media coverage wasn't like, oh yeah, they did it. Like they didn't start right away.
Not at all.
There's just a vibe. There's an eminent, like there's something.
No, there was a lot of concern trolling around losing Grant Williams, like maybe the biggest of them all.
Playing great, by the way.
Who is playing great? Yeah, he's going to make open threes for the Mavericks, and that's fine. But like that just wasn't really a tenable thing to keep him on this roster. And Marcus Smart obviously was a huge part of the team, but I think a lot of it is a lot of people didn't like watch Porzingis last year, and people just thought of what he looks like. Yeah. What was the? Yeah. I watched him twice when he played the Celtics, and he was really good. And then like no one watched Porzingis, so everybody just had the visions of him in Dallas and used that plus injury stuff to be like, oh, the move probably won't work. Porzingis, that post hype thing that we spoke about before we came on, Eric. Maybe you like take that away. Like people just have this post hype vision of what Porzingis actually is.
I just reverse hype.
Reverse hype,
like rookie guys, right? Or it's just like, oh, he got drafted and you get anchored, right, to like the position and the expectations that come on that versus the reality of what like most, picks do, right? It's just like, oh, the potential of something always creates this like whiplash effect where everyone's like, oh, it's worse than it actually is because I don't know, it betrayed them or like whatever. The brain can't deal with this idea that whatever you expected to happen like fell off so significant. It's like cognitive dissonance, right? And you just kind of like create a new reality, for whatever that is, and whatever it was, like coupled with going away or whatever, to the Wizards where people weren't watching. I did actually watch a lot of the Wizards because I like KP, man, and whatever. So you can't take a scout or whatever, an evaluator out of me. I'm like always going to watch individual players. I like Denny Avdija. Like I watch.
I love Denny. I'm a huge Denny guy.
I'm a big Denny guy, and I'm like, as long as Denny's there, I was going to watch them. And then KP went there, and I was like, oh, perfect. And I was like, oh, this guy's fucking way better than he was before. I was like, I thought he was done in that last year in Dallas. Like, oh, he lost his mobility, and I'm like, as soon as he can't move, well, I lost it, but I'm like, you're a like much more of a role player. And then he's like, no, I just need to get healthy. And he changed his whole strength and conditioning program and all this stuff that he's been talking about. But like, I saw it last year. I was like, oh, it's the first year he was good at post-up play, right? It was the first year he was really committed to getting his lower body where it needed to be to do, you know, the things that he wanted to do. And just like you saw some, like he's not like a wizard passing, but he has very good professional basketball sense for call it international roots or whatever. But like,
well, he can see everything too.
Is kind of how he learned how to make basketball, right? So like it's amazing to see like him be on this team and do this and kind of like have that motivation, because people forgot about what he is and people were like, oh, well, we thought you could have been more. And he's like, dude, I'm 27, bitch. I'm not done.
I am Wemby.
Wemby. That's a totally different conversation for later. But like he's good. There's a reason that he had the hype that he had, and now he's got a squad. Like, you don't think that guy, because people are like, well, he's kind of quiet and he says whatever. It's like, this dude has a purpose. I don't know the last time he had a purpose, and he also has it with maturity through the experiences that he has. And no one's ever said, I mean, whatever. Throw out all the junk from the like clashing stuff. Like, there's a lot to unpack. I'm not making Porzingis blameless. Nobody ever is blameless in anything. But like, on the whole,
he was so young then as well.
He's a guy that you could invest in as a person. Like, he was never a problem, and he was always somebody people wanted to work out. And you don't hear bad shit about him, right? And now he's got all of these things lined up. I'm like, this guy always seemed like a pro to me. He's the kind of guy that could handle and take on the hype in New York at the time he did it. Yeah. With fucking Phil Jackson and all that bullshit.
God, I forgot.
That guy owned it when he didn't even know what he was doing. I'm like, I'm going to bet on the 27, like now 9 bet.
Speaking of Alzheimer's.
Oh my God. You talk about like going to sleep and not doing your job. Like, I don't even know if he watched it. I'm not going to shit on Phil Jackson. He's amazing. But like, KP's the same guy. KP's the same guy that handled that shit when he was a jackass, right? By his own admitting.
He was a teen.
And he still was able to be like, I'm that superstar. Yeah, his body broke down. He didn't take it, whatever. But he had the mentality. And a guy that can do that and then make it through all of that adversity and actually improve. You know how many guys are just be like, cool, I got like one more paycheck or whatever. Like, James Harden's been playing the paycheck game for like the last 2 years. I'm like, and whatever, James Harden's amazing, but like Kristaps had reasons to do less and just be okay and do whatever. And he's like, no, I'm going to get better. Like, there's another one of these guys where you're like, that guy's going to have something to say about January and February with doldrums or whatever. Because he's like, everything I do, go, hey, Jason, you want to take the night off? No problem. Like, I got you,
Let me get
brother.
25.
Like, I will take all the smoke. Just be a decoy. Like, do whatever the fuck you want to do. I will dominate. This is what he did against the Knicks. Yeah. You knew he wanted to like make a statement, and when the Knicks came back,
revenge game,
quickly was doing his thing, and I really do like that. It's so weird. I don't know how
they're good.
They just have a lot of guys I really like, and they accidentally all got them at the same time.
You don't like Randall though, do you?
Deuce McBride.
Randall is a neutral.
Okay.
Randall's a neutral, but like, dude, man, so many of those guys on that team are 100% dudes I'd want on the Celtics. Like,
Josh Hart,
Thibodeau
Grimes,
was on the championship Celtics. Like, they have guys that we like. Thibodeau has a type, and I have that same type, right? Like, he's got a bunch of those guys. I'd kill for Josh Hart, but off the bench, by the way. Hauser for Hart, I would do that. They wouldn't, but like, I would. But like, man, this is like. There's guys to pass the baton to all season long, and dudes like Porzingis and Holiday, who, I don't know, like, yes, I think he'll play hard against Milwaukee. Like, no one likes that shit or whatever, but like, Holiday also gets rest at 33. The older guy, like, naturally, he's like, oh, as he scores some. Why would you use him unnecessarily? He's like, in a case of emergency, go to the fourth guy, like, right? Like, the hierarchy that they can like manipulate to, if Jason or Jalen is not like El Fuego, is just to like be cognizant of that and just flow to some order of like any of those 5 guys, right? 3 out of any of those 5 guys at any time. Like, that's a beautiful place to be. And if you have dudes that are willing to do that, that's another reason where I'm like, I don't know if there's going to be a doldrum, because there's going to be guys that just haven't. They're like, fine, it's my night tonight, right? You're like, there's a passing thing. Oh, you don't have the fire tonight or whatever. Yeah, we'll wake you up. You'll be the fourth wheel, like, right? You'll be the guest sitting on the couch while we're chopping it up on the dance floor, right? Like they'll shift personas, I think, and then another guy will do like what Marcus always tried to do, but isn't good enough offensively. He's been trying to do it in Memphis. He's been amazing at the beginning of their 0 for 5 or whatever. He's been like carrying them as like the second leading scorer. I'm just like,
I feel bad for Marcus.
Christ.
Yeah.
Look,
Kristaps Porzingis, just another star that Luka Doncic has ripped out his will to play basketball, and that's why Tatum's better than Luka. So pretty obvious there. But
he's
Eric,
also skinnier than Luka.
yeah, too, by far. But Eric, this was absolutely awesome. We got to wrap up. Hour and a half of your time. We so very much appreciate it, and we will be tapping you again very soon to jump back on. Anything you want to plug? Anywhere you want to direct the folks to check you out?
No, I'm actually kind of in always read Swish Theory if you want to keep up on the draft. Those guys are amazing, and I do the best I can to throw ideas out in their direction and see what they'll scoop up. But they have just an absolute tiger army of like talented and kidless and young, like aggressive film devourers, and it is amazing. They give me life. And other than that, I would say coming up in Summer League, keep your eyes out. I might have a new app on the market for doing some stuff. So that is about all the teaser I'll do right now. But I got something brewing for the end of this season.
Yeah. And just follow Eric on Twitter as well.
Yeah.
Always,
Especially like the Celtics, because I tweet way too much about them specifically.
We will be in Summer League, Eric, so we'll have to meet up for a drink or something.
I'm coming home at Christmas break to go watch a game, so if anybody wants
all right, if I'm around, I'll hit
something.
you up. I'm not sure when I'm flying back yet, but yeah, absolutely. Jakey.
I definitely won't be there in Boston at Christmas, but
definitely not.
You never know. Just wanted to throw it out there. I'm definitely going to be near the Garden. God knows I'm not paying $1,000 to go see him out here at the Chase, man.
Yeah, no. All right, boys, this is awesome. Love your work, gentlemen. I'll talk to you later. First to the floor, out.
I love this.